let's answer some DMs. I think we're going to start off with just 2 because I owe these people answers to questions they asked me a very long time ago. And I saved them and said that I would answer them. And now I finally have time to do so. And they're very good questions. I think they're super helpful. So if you have any questions that you would like answered, go ahead and put me on. Let me know. Welcome to What Were You Saying? The idea behind this podcast is to create a space where you are allowed to find the magic in regular people. I used to beat myself up about having black cat energy and not being a golden retriever in social conversations. And it was because I was not respecting my contribution to conversations. I'm a listener. I love listening and I love learning about people. I look at people like they are beautiful cakes, and every cake has different ingredients that went into making it. And I like digging in to find out what those ingredients are and just learning. You'd be surprised at what you can find out if you sat back and listened and you were not focused on getting your thoughts out. My contribution to the conversation is listening. And I personally love being that person who, when you're in a group of people and someone a little bit more charismatic, maybe a little bit more extroverted, maybe a little bit more golden retriever energy comes in and they kind of take over the conversation. And that person who was sharing that story, who might be a little bit more reserved, slowly starts to die down. I like being that person that comes in and is able to say, hey, what were you saying? Just so that everyone can have a chance to tell their story. And, people have told me that no one's going to want to listen to this because regular people are boring. And my goal would be, if I'm able to create a space where people could then see the magic in everyday people, then maybe we could move a little bit further away from this capitalistic mindset that we have to keep going and more and better and need and want. If we could take a step back and see the magic in the things that we already have and the people that are already around us, we could probably spend less time on social media stressing, comparing, putting ourselves up against these situations and people and places that, at the end of the day, what is more beautiful than the life that is right in front of you, the one that has been uniquely given to you? But Deja, don't you run a social media account? I know it's not in my favor. The algorithm gods are not going to like me. They're going to be saying, hey, you're supposed to be keeping people on the platform, not getting them off. But honestly, if you could take what you see on social media and use it as a tool to enhance your life and make it better, that is a really good place to be. It's a really good place to be. So this is my contribution to the world. What were you saying? Eventually, I'd love to have actual guests on here, but I also want to make sure that listeners have a voice as well. If you don't have friends, sometimes it can be really hard and it's really easy to get locked inside of your head. But if you have some questions or ideas or situations that you're going through and you have another person to bounce those things off of, sometimes you feel a lot less alone. You feel a lot less crazy. So I want to be able to create a space where listeners, viewers, followers can send in their questions, can talk about them here. You could either join in an interview or just send in your question and have me talk about it. Or if I have another guest on here, we can mull it over, but then you can actually hear it played out with other people. You can get outside of your head. And even if you don't have friends right there with you, then you know that you have friends out in the world and you still have an opportunity to tell your story. It's important. You are important. So this episode, we're just going to kick it off with answering a couple of the DMs that I've gotten. And I'm going to try to answer these in chronological order because I get a lot of questions and a lot of DMs and I have not had any time whatsoever to answer them, but I'm creating the time and the space because it's important. And quite honestly, getting a little sick of my own content on Instagram. No shade. I love my followers. I love all of you guys, but there was a point in time where, I don't know, man, I posted something and all the comments were like, oh my God, Deja, you're so this. And it's like, it's about you. It's not about me. I don't want that. I don't want you. I don't want to be celebrated in that way. I want to hold up a mirror so that you can come in and you can say, wow, I didn't think I could do this thing, but I did it. I went out and I did. That's my thing. Go out and do. Go out and do. Put the phone down. Stop feeding yourself breadcrumbs. Get yourself some full meals because you'd be surprised at how satisfying a good meal can be. Nothing feels as good as doing the things that you said that you were going to do. So we're doing it. First question is from, I want to say her name is Fenice, but it could be Fenice, but I think it's Fenice because Fenice sounds like an actual name. I feel like as someone who's named Deja and people say my name in the craziest ways, Oasis, Dasha, Doja. And I'm like, does that sound like a name to you? Desaya? I mean, it could be. There's somebody out there in the world who's named Desaya. I get it. But Deja has a continent in it. So I guess that's, yeah. So I'm going to say it's Fenice, like Denise, but with an F. Fenice Alexandra. She said, hey sis, I have a question for you. When did you get diagnosed for your ADHD? I've had similar symptoms forever that I've written off as my anxiety or depressive tendencies, but they may actually be undiagnosed ADHD. I'm coming to just now realize it a year postpartum. How did you know your symptoms were genuine? How do I not gaslight myself? What are your tips for getting a proper diagnosis or proper help with or without, but especially without any medication? I know these things are personal. I just genuinely feel very frustrated with my brain most days, and I would like to better understand where the frustrating actions are coming from. I know that you're not a doctor, but you are me in another universe. So I figured I would try and see if you were willing to share some advice. Thank you so much in advance. Currently struggling with consistent sleep patterns. Okay, cool. So let's start at the beginning. I was first diagnosed with ADHD when I was 23 years old. I had just got promoted into a new role. And up until that point, I had been an independent contributor. It was all me. I was all my focus. And then I was in charge of a team of people, and I could not keep anything straight. It was absolutely insane. And things just felt way, way harder than they needed to be. I'd never struggled that hard before, and it felt like a breakdown in the system. And then I read a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen, which was the first time a system had been introduced into my orbit. And I was like, money, this is where it's at. So once I implemented a system and I had a baseline for how I was doing things, it made it really easy to see that something was wrong, because up until that point, I had never had a system. Everything was kind of in disarray. So for me to then get a system and then everything is disarray in this completely unique way where it's like you have all the tools set up, but your brain is just not grasping this. Something is off. And I'd never thought that because I was like one of those gifted and talented students. And I think that the problem with ADHD is the way that it presents itself in women. We do gaslight ourselves. We're just like, put your head down and work. You know, we suffer in silence. And then especially if you were in that, I feel like in the 90s, there was like this... There was like this surge of gifted and talented students. And what they did was they would say, hey, you know, you have this reading level here. And it would put you in this bucket of you don't need any help. And so you internalize that. You're like, oh, I don't need any help. I've got this. I'm gifted. I'm gifted. I'm gifted. But all that really means is you take test well, which is super easy if you like hyper focus on a specific thing. My element was reading. That was my bread and butter. I loved it. But it makes it really easy to ignore if anything else is going on. So the way that I would say, how do you make sure that your symptoms are genuine, is by understanding that we live in a neurotypical world. And if you are struggling to the point where your brain is frustrated, it might be time to check something out. There's a difference between not having discipline, but that's what the trigger was for me, because now I had introduced this system where I had the discipline, but my brain just could not stay on track. No matter how much my intentions were, no matter how much I planned, it was still something off. So I'd say like get a baseline and then pay attention to your behavior. That's what let me know like, okay, this seems way harder than it need to be. Like I would find myself hyper focusing, and I grew up that way as well. Like it was nothing for me to hyper focus on a book. It was nothing for me to hyper focus on learning something new. That was another one of the signs for me. Like when I got this new job, I would hyper focus on how to do it well, to the point where I'm spending, 8 to 10 hours just planning stuff. And I'm like, ooh, this is a little weird. Getting a proper diagnosis, it's absolutely disgusting how difficult it is to get mental health help in America. There's so many friction points, so many obstacles. The only thing that I could offer is like, keep looking. Don't allow someone to make you feel like you're making something up. Also, I see a lot of people discard mental health professionals after like 1 or 2 interactions. They're like, oh, I met with this person. Understand that you can meet with more people. Like, do not stop when it comes to your mental health. And I know that it's so hard because it's even hard asking for help initially, but then for someone to like dismiss you and you're busy and you have all these competing priorities, like you cannot have your mental health take a back seat. So keep pushing, find a psychologist, a psychiatrist, that fits you. Do not stop until you get the proper help, or at least you get some coping mechanisms. If you don't have ADHD, not everybody who thinks that they have ADHD has it. So if it's like, hey, you don't have it and there's something else, some stressors that are going on in your life that are contributing to it, then that's one thing. But if you can draw a parallel backwards to where those signs and symptoms might have shown up throughout your childhood and it was just dismissed, chances are you probably flew under the radar, especially if you were a well-behaved kid. I was a well-behaved kid, and I was always focused on trying to like not be a burden. So in doing so, whatever symptoms I had, I was gaslighting myself 100%. Like, I'm not trying hard enough, or I need to focus more. But once you start taking a stock of your past, it's real easy to point it out. Like if you've ever been super impulsive, like quitting a job type shit, like just, I'm done with this job. These are things that by themselves, okay, it may be one-offs, but when you have like the combination of impulsivity, hyperfixation, not being able to remember, jumping from thought to thought, forgetting things. I locked my keys inside of my car probably once a month for like a year, the first year that I started driving. Like they knew me on a first name basis at Papa Lock. That's how bad it was. It wasn't a game. It wasn't a joke. So, but I know there's people who's like, oh, that's everybody. But after a certain point, you're like, this isn't everybody. Everybody's not struggling this way. The world would be in dysfunction. If everyone was struggling the way that I'm struggling right now, the world would be in dysfunction. The more people who come out and create a more functional world, I think the happier that we will all be. So hopefully that answers your question about not gaslighting yourself. Look backward into your past and then seek out help, but don't stop. If a door closes, especially when it comes to your mental health, I'm not saying it's right or anything. It should not be as hard as it is to get mental health, but don't stop there. Do not stop at one door close when it comes to something that is making your life difficult in the way that ADHD can make your life difficult. Getting help with or without medication. I would say if you need medication, take medication. Do not feel any guilt or stress or put yourself down about the idea about white knuckling through this. Oh, I need to do this without any medication, or I know that this person doesn't take meds. You can't do that to yourself. You have your own unique brain chemical mashup. You cannot compare yourself to other people. If you take meds and it makes your life better, then that's just what you got to do. Here's the thing that I love running experiments on my life. Start running experiments on your shit. Start figuring out, okay, well, if I take medicine on, these 3 days, these are my most productive days, then that's what I'll do. And I don't want to take it on these days. Run experiments to find out what works best for you. There's certain medications I can't take. No shade to anybody who takes these medications, but I can't take Adderall. Can't do it. It breaks out my face. I don't know if Adderall breaks out my face or if Adderall makes me not care about washing my face. Like, I don't know what that is, but when I take Adderall, I forget to do life things. So while I might do the things that are in my brain, like, oh, I need to complete this list, I forget to do the life stuff. Like I'll forget to eat. And I won't realize that this is a problem that's happening until like a day and a half in. I'm like, oh, snap. I haven't had anything to eat. I'll notice it because I'll start falling while I'm skating or something like that. I'll start falling and hitting the ground more than I ever do because I am not eating enough. So Adderall, I can't really rock with it. I know that like Vyvanse is like super expensive. I've had better results with that, but I go on and off. Every time when I feel like, okay, stuff's getting out of hand. There's also other things that are going out of hand. So that's something that I would say is try to get a baseline. It's so important to try and get a baseline for your life. You need to know who you are when you have a consistent vibe, so that when something happens or you add something to it or something gets out of whack, you can tell what it was and what the measurable result is. But if your life is already out of whack, you're not going to be able to tell if something is actually helping you or if it's hurting you. So it's kind of a catch-22 because you might need the medication to get you to the point where you have a baseline, but then like you don't have a baseline to know if the medication is helping you or not. So yeah. I would say try a combination of things. Something that's helped my ADHD way more than medication is journaling and planning. Not even kidding. There's definitely periods, I would say, where medication helps. Like if it's like an end of the year push for work, it's like, oh, well, we might need a little bit of extra help. But I've stopped having like a pride issue about needing medication at times. I don't need it all the time. There are some times where it's like, oh, I definitely need a push, and not from like a recreational standpoint, but like there's so much going on that I cannot focus, but I'm always also making sure to eliminate unnecessary suffering as much as possible, if that makes sense. Like, I know that I operate best with a schedule so that I can have organized chaos. There's a really great book, if you haven't read it, and it's completely unrelated to ADHD, by the way, but it's called Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. And he has a piece in there where he mentions just a sentence, and it's conservative early, liberal late. And the idea behind it is you build the structure so that you can play inside of the sandbox. So build the structure and then you're free. You're a much more freer versus if you just have chaos going on all the time, everything is going to suck. It's always going to feel terrible. So what's helped me the most is having a schedule that I kind of stick to as much as possible and planning out my week, actually thinking about the things that I want to do, the outcomes that I want to happen, and having visual reminders everywhere. There's a couple different, I'm going to do a YouTube video on some of the tools that have been helping out my ADHD life tremendously. One of them is Tile. I don't know if you guys know what Tile is, but it's like this little thing that you strap onto your devices, and man, I can't tell you how many times I found my keys and I've been like, wow, I never would have found that. I never would have found that. And the cool thing about Tile is it works reverse. So if you could find your keys, but you can't find your phone, same thing. Another one is Otter.ai. I use that for work. It's fantastic because what it does is it records meetings and it transcribes the audio for you. So if you are listening to a meeting and you're distracted, you can go back to your Otter AI. It transcribes the notes for you. You're able to pull out specific action items. You can see word for words. I'm a visual learner, so I need to see the words. That's what I would say, figuring out what works best for you based upon your specific learning style. I have to see things. So if I have a planner, I also have to have like a wall calendar so I can see it visually, or it will fall to the wayside. And I don't get it right 100% of the time. Sometimes I'll write and plan everything out and I still won't do it, but I'm much more forgiving and I have kind of like a map to go back to. Hopefully that helps answer that question. I'd say, and offer yourself some grace. Offer yourself some grace and understand that we live in a neurotypical world and it was not created with the divergent in mind. And so all of the reasons why you are frustrated is because the solutions that are being presented to you don't work for your brain style. And you just have to find ways that work best for you. Try everything. Whereas one person might have journaling, another person might work best with sending themselves video messages. Hey, video messages like Alice in Wonderland, watch this at 6 a.m. and telling them what to do. Experiment with your life. Do not allow yourself to be thrust into frustration where you're beating yourself up, because at the end of the day, it's the neurodivergent mind that is able to come up with solutions that people didn't think of and help other neurodivergent people. So don't be too hard on yourself. Hopefully that helps answer that question. Keep trying. If you haven't received a proper diagnosis, please keep trying. Find someone that works for you. Try different medications, and don't be afraid to go off of a medication if it's not making your life better in the unique way that you define better. And then also don't feel guilty about having to be on medication if that is something that makes your life better. Just know yourself and experiment. Fanice, hopefully that answers your question. And if I pronounced your name wrong, you check me, because it's so important. And thank you for your patience. Okay, we have one more. That question took a lot longer, so I'm going to be kind of brisk with this one, be a little bit shorter. So the second DM that we have is from Summer. And Summer said, I was reading your previous post about attachment and entitlement, and it really hit me personally. I find myself so disappointed with my life lately, blaming my terrible childhood for why I can't have the things I wish I had as an adult. What's a good way to start shedding these feelings and combating them? This is a very good question, Summer. It's a very, very good question. It's something that I have struggled with, like a victim mentality, victim mindset is something that I've definitely struggled with in the past. So something that I think is super important to call out here, just for clarity, is that when I say a victim mindset or victim mentality, I'm not saying that being a victim is a mentality. I think that's important to say. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that there there are things that we do that contribute to unnecessary suffering in our life. And I have a YouTube video that's coming out on this if this is something that you're interested in, where I will go much, much deeper. But it basically goes into understanding the difference between necessary suffering and unnecessary suffering. Necessary suffering is the suffering that is unavoidable. And it doesn't matter if you're rich, if you're poor, if you're beautiful, if you're ugly. It's all the things that we have to go through as a part of being human beings. Unnecessary suffering is suffering that if we were to stop doing something, or if we were to start doing something, then the suffering would stop. That is the clear indicator that is something that is contributing to a victim mentality, because there's something that's within your control. And sometimes it doesn't seem that way. It's really hard for us to really think about it. We think that certain things aren't in our control. Like, oh, my boss hates me. Right. You might not be in control of your boss hating you, but you can be in control of how you interact with your boss. You can control if you still want to have that job. You can control your interpretation of their actions. These are all things that you can control. One of the biggest things that I would say to answer your question is a good way to start shedding these feelings and combating them is determining, one, what is unnecessary suffering and what is necessary suffering. The thing about, or at least in my experience, because I have very much struggled with a victim mentality, really, really held me back. I'd say like the first 3 to 4 years of my 20s, where I spent a lot of time angry with my mom, very, very angry at her and all of the things that she didn't do and all the ways that she like left me hanging and all of the lessons that I was going to have to learn. I didn't know at the time as a result of like, I just felt behind. Let's just say that. I just felt behind. I felt like everyone else had it figured out and my mom didn't equip me. And it took me taking a step back and realizing like, okay, I did not get all of the things that I deserved in childhood. That's okay. Fact. No one is negating that. But then it was like, okay, what next? Like, is that, do we stop there? Do we stop right there? And I mean, when we stop there, it gives us no options. There's no alternative. There's no way out. Like, we just have to sit with that information. We can't do anything with it. It's static. So it took me saying, okay, I didn't get all of these things. Well, what are the things that I'm saying are the most important that I didn't get? Well, I didn't get consistency. I didn't get stability. I didn't get love. I didn't get appreciation. I didn't get someone, coming to me when I'm obviously overloaded with all of these things and saying, hey, can I help you? So what do I do now? Well, I've identified the things that I feel that I've needed, or at least the things that I feel have held me back the most. And now my only option is for me to give those things to myself. And that's how I kind of started my reparenting journey. And once I started giving myself those things, a couple different things happened. One, I stopped looking externally for them. I found that the type of men that I dated, I wasn't dating them because I was moving from lack of not having any stability. So I'm like dating like super stable men who are like almost like controllers. Like, I stopped doing that because I was showing up for myself in these very, very important ways. I'd say there's a number of things that you could do. If I had to go back to the very beginning and give myself advice, the thing that I would say is identify all of the places that hurt you the most and why they hurt you. And say, what would you have wanted the outcome to be? What would you have wanted instead? And be very, very clear. If it's you would have wanted your mom to have girls' nights with you and you guys do facials and you put cucumbers on your eyelids, like, you have to be that specific. And then once you've identified those things, you have to turn around and you have to give them to yourself. And it's hard and it's lonely. And of course it doesn't seem fair. All of these things, you are 100% right. You are right. Know that you are right. But then also know that there comes a point in time where you have to choose to live. You have to choose to live, and you have to also be grateful, have gratitude that you have more tools. That's hard. That's very, very hard to say. A lot of times when we hear the phrase, they were doing the best with the tools that they had, it can come off as dismissive, as like, oh, okay, we did our best. But that's the truth. If you give somebody a toolbox and it has a certain amount of tools in it and you say, build this house, and they build you a shack of a house with the tools that they have, that's it. Like, you can't get mad and say, hey, this person has a mansion. Where's my mansion? This is the tools that they had. So all of the things that they did not give you, it's going to be very hard, but take a step back and look at their life Did their parents give that to them? All of the things that you wanted, did they get? And if they didn't, how are they supposed to know to give it to you? Granted, there's people who come up in terrible situations. One of them, who will not perpetuate those things forward because they've identified more tools, but not everybody does that. Not everybody gets the opportunity to do that. Some get it way later than you would have liked, but it comes, It's just understanding some people just don't have the tools. Some people aren't equipped to be parents. Some people aren't equipped to have a family. I wish it wasn't this way. And the only thing that you can do is you don't have to forgive them, but you do have to choose yourself. And something that my friend Jordan told me a couple weeks ago that I think was absolutely beautiful was the idea of having like almost a ceremony where if you can't forgive that person or you're so angry at them or, they've done something unforgivable, what you do have to do is you have to be willing to forgive them for you and then let go. And so something that she told me was to imagine myself with this person that I felt wronged me in some way, shape, or form, or I felt like owed me an apology for something. And imagine them standing in front of me. And we both have a cord coming from our belly buttons that are attached to each other. And you say, thank you. I forgive you. I love you. And I'm sorry. And you could go further than that. You could say, I forgive you for I'm sorry that you didn't have this. Or you could leave it something super, super simple. And even your thank you. Thank you for showing me how not to treat people. It doesn't matter. You say, thank you. I love you. I forgive you. I'm sorry. Whatever order works for you. But once you say it, look at that person and you hug them. If you can hug them, you don't have to hug them. We don't have to hug. But then you cut that cord. And their cord goes back into their belly button and your cord goes back into your belly button. And that way, people don't have hold over your life and you can choose yourself. Choose yourself would be the biggest thing that I would say. If you are struggling with having a victim mentality, oh, the world is me, the world is always happening to me, why do people treat me this way? I would say start by giving yourself the thing that you needed the most that you didn't get, and that requires you to sit down in a room alone, think about your childhood, think about who you were, think about the ways that you were failed, think about the good things that you enjoyed that reinforced the person that you are today. Think about all of those things and then think about what you needed and what you need the most now. And how does that show up as you giving it to yourself? That would be it. That would be my biggest advice for shedding and combating those feelings so that you are not held prisoner by your childhood. That is the last thing that you want. I've read some fantastic books if you guys are looking for resources on this. One of them is How to Survive Your Childhood Now That You're an Adult by Ira Israel. Fantastic read. If you're looking for some more suggestions, let me know and I'll definitely get a list together. Also, check out and subscribe to my YouTube so you can catch that, how I overcame my victim mentality. And honestly, it was one of the game changers that leveled up my entire life because I was no longer sitting around waiting for someone to give me something that I felt like I deserved, and I was making it happen for myself. And I was no longer holding on to grudges and pain and poison, and it was tainting all of my current interactions and relationships. I was able to come out of that, and I'd love to be able to help you guys come out of that. And yeah, so I'm going to wrap this one up. It went a little bit longer. These are only 2 questions, and we're already at 40 minutes. So if you have any additional questions along this line, anything roller skating, mental health, wellness, all that fun stuff, if you follow me on Instagram already, you kind of already know what I'm about. If not, go ahead and follow your girl. Thank you so much. And I will see you the next time on What Were You Saying?